I love that. The mentor became the mentee in that regard, right?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Did you also hear Mallory putting me in a different generation than her? You're making me feel, oh, Mallory, come on.
Listen, I thought that was the nicest way to deliver that.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'll go lay down for a nap when we're done
here.
So.
Hey, this generation likes to nap too.
Yeah.
This episode of Inside the Process is powered by Trainual, the one app that organizes who does what and how. Check it out at trainual.com.
Well, what is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Inside the Process, where we sit down with some of the brightest minds in business and dig into their process secrets and best practices to help you continuously improve and level up the work you're doing. I'm Mallory, a 10-year systems and ops veteran turned marketer, and I'm here with Shawn, the super awesome training and dev guy, better known around here as Mentor Shawn.
Hey, everybody. I am super pumped today because we get to chat with Karen Weeks here in the house with us today at Inside the Process, and I couldn't be more excited. So if you don't know her yet, get ready because she is on a mission to help everyone shine at work. And I just love that just powerhouse of positivity. I just love that so much. So with over 20 years of experience shaping awesome company cultures, she's now the Global Chief People Officer at Obviously. Karen is not just talk either. She's got a coaching biz, she's got a podcast, she's got a book, and Mallory and I are just super stoked to have her here to share some real life wisdom with all of us here. So, Karen, welcome to Inside the Process.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I love this energy. I love this topic. So I know it's going to be a great conversation.
Awesome.
Well, let's just right out of the gate jump into it. I feel like high performance is sort of the Loch Ness monster of the business world. You know, everybody talks about it, but no one really seems to agree on what it looks like. So I'm hoping you can kick us off here. How do you personally define high performance?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because I think like so many things within people, culture, HR, whatever you want to call this, there's an art and a science to it. And so for me, high performing is all about understanding what the goals are, how we're going to get there, and what good versus great looks like. And I think that's why it's a little nuanced is because for one team or one company, that might look like something. Somewhere else, it might look like something different. And neither is right or wrong. But I think the key and the reason why it might seem mysterious at times or like jargony and not real is because people don't take the time to say, what does that actually mean here? And how do we define it? And not just define it, but then how do we develop people against it? How do we set performance goals against it? How do we actually bring it to life? It's like values. It's great if you've said it's the thing, but then how are you actually living it?
I love that. Good versus great really stands out to me there because I think that people probably feel like that's a small window, if you will, but I feel like good to great can be pretty massive in some circumstances. So with all of these things, you covered so many things, goals and setting people up to performance goals and development and all of these key things that you're talking about. How do you help leaders to define high performance for their team and ultimately the organization as a whole? Because sometimes even those things can be different.
Absolutely. And I think part of it is the design, the maturity, the scaling of a certain team. So if you've got, when I worked at a company that had an 800-person call center, good was okay because we just needed people to answer the calls, do the tickets, get the stuff done. Of course, we wanted to do it with the best customer service, whatever, but the actual tasks at hand, we were looking for people that were reliable and would get the thing done, while the product team that was a much smaller team had to be more innovative and creative and focused on the market from a competitive standpoint. And so there we were looking for outstanding, great, top of the line thinkers, all those sort of things. And so those were two very different definitions within the same company. And so I think that helping identify, first of all, what is the mission and vision of the team or the department? How are you attracting talent and what is making talent be successful on this team? And how does that tie to the business goal? So personally, from my sort of HR philosophy standpoint, is The people can't exist without a healthy business, and a business won't be healthy if you don't have the right people in the right roles. So it's a combination of what are you looking for out of the people in order to hit the business goals? And are you setting clear enough business goals so that people can be great by achieving them? And so I think it really depends on what are the overall business goals, vision, mission, et cetera, strategy, and then how does the department support that? And then you can define it to that. Not quite cascading, but sort of cascading.
You said something really interesting, meets expectations. And so I have a follow-up question here. Would you say that a lot of times good is meeting expectations on a performance review and great are really those people who are exceeding expectations that fall into that high performance bucket?
That's how I look at it. And I think where it becomes tricky is, one, if someone's looking for a promotion, because promotion is not necessarily doing good in your job. You're going above and beyond. You're starting to identify and demonstrate skills of that next level or whatever that future job is. That's all part of great. You might be more proactive versus reactive, like whatever it is, but that's going beyond your job description. If you're just coming in and doing your job, yes, awesome. Thank you. That's what we're paying you for. But that's what we're paying you for, is to do your job. We're not, the other pieces above and beyond and sort of the future of your development or where you want to take your role. And I think that's where people really struggle. And I think that's where potentially newer managers struggle and people that are newer to the workforce struggle. And I get it, right? Like I've been there. I'm like, wait, I'm doing my job. You're telling me I'm doing a great job at it. And I think that's the other thing too, is we use language very loosely. So even in that sentence, I said, you're doing a good job. You're great at what you do. Okay, so what does that mean? Does that mean I'm doing what you expect, or does that mean I'm going above and beyond and I should be getting more money in a promotion? And so I think even language plays into it. And that's something that we do a lot of coaching with managers, is not just defining high performance, but then how do you talk about it with your team so they truly understand where they stand?
Our CEO has something that I think is a really interesting and valuable framework for people when it comes to knowing if somebody is due for a promotion or not. And it's just to ask yourself simply, have they been performing the responsibilities or demonstrating those responsibilities for the last few months? And so before he'll give a promotion, that's something that he likes to see. And I think that's a really good indicator for people, especially in that high performance bucket of they're going above and beyond and doing the duties of getting to that next level. And so it feels like with ease, you can make that decision. But I also think there's this huge debate between getting hired and meeting expectations and then feeling like, your boss is maybe on your case a little bit because you're not exceeding expectations. So I'm hoping you can talk through this. And I feel like people are going to have variations on this topic. But do you think it's okay for leaders or organizations to say, hey, we only want high performers. We only want people that are exceeding those expectations, and be okay with saying, you know what? There are a lot of companies out there where you can meet expectations, but here is not one of them.
Yeah, it's a conversation I've had with many leaders over the years. And I think to the last point of your question, that's really where you need to be able to say sort of the why that we need high performers and someone else doesn't. Because every company wants good people that are, adding value, all the things. At the end of the day, I think people just want to better understand the why behind a lot of things. And I think we get into a little bit of the parental because I told you so a little bit, sometimes too much in management. And so I think if you're able to identify, we're a really small team. And so every person has to go above and beyond because there's only 3 of us. Go work at another company where there's 100 people on the team and maybe there's more of a range of expectations. Or we're in a high growth stage right now and it's a really competitive market. And if we're not on top, we're going to lose. And so we need people all in for these next 2 years or whatever it is. So I think if you're starting to explain why that language is being used, then employees will be, okay, either I get it and like, yes, I'm all in, here I go. Or, I don't know if that's right for me. I may make other decisions. Either is okay. But I think just giving them that context, if you're constantly saying we're high performing, that feels like either burnout or I'm never actually going to get promoted because you're always going to be moving the goalpost. That's what employees hear.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about that in terms of being able to identify who those high performers are. And there's lots of different ways to look at that. There's data, obviously, but I want to actually turn to personality tests. We talked about a few of these before. We talked about DISC. We talked about 16 personalities. And my question is, how valuable are these? And do they have a place? Do they allow us to kind of get a crystal ball view of our team members? Or does it potentially make us put them into boxes and then treat them a certain way because we found, this is what their personality is? I'd love to get your take on that and how you've used those in your work.
Yeah, it's a great question. I believe very much in using those sort of tests to help understand different people's natural tendencies, how they like to get feedback, how they take in information, how they make decisions, all of those things. I don't think it applies to their potential. And the reason for that is, look, at the end of the day, I personally hate data. Like, I'm much more of a gut feeling person. I don't have the patience to look at Excel spreadsheets. I kind of get enough of what I need and then I just kind of run with it. I of course can do that. I'm a CPO. I can create a budget. I can do whatever I need to do. So it's not that I can't do it. And it doesn't mean that I shouldn't have become a leader because it's not where I go to first. However, it was on me as part of my development to stretch and get more comfortable with that part of a personality that is not natural to me. So I think it really is more about the development of the person and helping them understand, hey, this may not be your natural place, but if you want to grow into this kind of role or this kind of department or this kind of level, it may be a little uncomfortable for you. So how can we help you get there? But I don't think it means I can't do it. I mean, I could technically be a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, an astronaut, whatever. I just have to maybe get outside my comfort zone to do that. And then it's up to me to decide if that's what I feel comfortable doing or not.
I love that. Have you seen, you had experiences with any companies that have actually used these effectively, have done this in the right way? And what did that look like? Love to get your take on that.
Yeah. So, a couple of companies I've worked with, we've done lots of different ones. We've done DISC, Myers-Briggs, MBTI, Real Colors, pick one and we've done it. I think for me, it's more about the cohesiveness of the team. And so this actually speaks to what we were just talking about. When I look at a leadership team, I want people that are more introverted versus extroverted. Because if everybody was extroverted, people would never shut up and we'd never actually make any decisions. We need that thoughtfulness and reflectiveness of the introvert. Or if we only had people that were more steady, which is part of the DISC, versus the drivers, then we would never, we would just rush towards everything and never think about how it's impacting people and take a breath every once in a while. So I think you actually need all those different personalities on a team. And whenever I do trainings with managers, it's actually something that I talk about is, how is this happening amongst your team? Because I've seen an misunderstanding of those different personalities lead to conflict and misalignment when it literally is just, I didn't know that you needed more examples because I tend to focus more on personal impact. Now I can do this differently, and it changes the whole dynamic of the team or the relationship, including, leadership teams or engineering teams, whatever the team is. And so I think that's where it can be really powerful. And for people to say, hey, data's not my thing. So I would love, could you look at this when I pull a report? Because I'd really love an extra set of eyes because I know that's not my strength. And then they turn around and say, hey, I have to prepare for feedback. I know you're really good at thinking through what another human might be thinking. Can you help me prepare for that? And now all of a sudden we're a really well-rounded and supporting each other kind of team.
Yeah, I really love what we just talked about there. Something that stuck out to me and I'm thinking about is having good development with the team about what those different personalities are, because there's a lot of things that can be left up to interpretation by one team member over another. And it's I'm not going to do that with them because they don't like data or whatever, right? And so it lends to, there's got to be a nice holistic view and training around with the company and the team members about how to use that information effectively, and so you can work cohesively as a group.
That's so true. I worked for a company once where we had to take the DISC assessment. And I don't know why they thought it was a good idea to put our letters at the end of our cubicle names. And so I was a high D and I had like pretty much low of everything else. And I am an introverted person. And I don't think I, am super extroverted or loud. I'm just really driven and I like to execute. But people used to like poke fun at me and they're like, for the quietest person here, like it's so intimidating to see that like next to your name because it seems like you're just this like loud, direct, mean person. But it wasn't true at all because I was just like somebody who was really driven to execute. I'm much more vocal now, but I was quieter then.
We labeled you.
Yeah.
Oh no. Well, and I think that's where it comes, like, there's got to be like a lot of education around it and, a lot of common language starting to be used. But I think even when it comes to hiring, though it is not a hiring tool unless it's like a certified skill-based tool, which most of these are not, it is helping you round out the team. So for example, someone who used to work with me on another in another company, she was very analytical and she and I made like the perfect match and like, this very symbiotic relationship. And so that's where, as a leader, thinking about as you're growing your team and finding development opportunities for people, maybe you can delegate that to someone because they are really good at that and they like doing it. And I think that's the other piece too when it comes to high performing teams, feedback, development, is that perfect marriage of I'm good at it and I like doing it. That's my sweet spot as a team member.
I hear that so often, and I think it's so important when we're making these types of assessments. And so we talked a lot about just understanding our people at large. What does high performance mean for our teams and for individuals? We talked about personality assessments. But I think what a lot of times people miss is like that own self-reflection and how you carry yourself as a leader piece. We're so constantly focused on everybody else's performance. And when I think about some of the best and worst leaders that I've experienced in my career, there's a commonality that stands out between them. And it's that good, bad, or indifferent, all leaders lead by some sort of example. Sometimes they teach you what not to be, but I think the great ones truly teach you what to strive for, not just in the words and the fluff and the jargon, but truly in just how they carry themselves and their actions. But I'll be honest with you both. I think as a new people manager, it's really challenging to lead a team and also continue to be a high-performing individual contributor. So how can leaders reasonably become the living, breathing embodiment of high performance? But this is the really important part here, without burning themselves out, which is not good for anybody.
Yeah. And I think that transition into management is so hard because being a manager is a whole other job. As an individual contributor, I had my tasks and I had my list. Even if I'm a strategic individual contributor, like I have my thing that I am owning. Now as a manager, it's not about doing the thing anymore. It's helping everybody else do the thing and working with my peers to even identify what that thing is and talking to a VP about, well, how does the business thing relate to my team? And so it's so much more open conversation and collaborative and working with others to do the thing. And so I think that transition is really, really hard. And one reason why I love working with new managers, because it's like such a exciting but scary part of their development. And so I think one thing that's really important, going back to your original question, is taking the opportunity to recognize that this is a development step in your career. What got you to this moment is not going to be the things that get you moving forward. And so by investing in your own development, finding a mentor, finding a coach, asking your company about new manager training, all of those things to say, hey, I need to onboard in this new role because it is totally different. Now, that doesn't necessarily help from bandwidth and burnout because that's adding things to your plate as you are also trying to lead this team. But I think that's where you really start to work on setting priorities, figuring out roles and responsibilities. What are you focusing on today versus tomorrow? Who on your team can take things? So the other thing that I've had a lot of experience with is working in earlier stage companies where a lot of managers are still literally player coaches. So they might be a client services manager and they still have their own book of business. And so really working on things like doing a time audit and time boxing. And I know those are things that, you read any training book and that would be in it, but then actually figure out how to do it for you. And it's going to look different. And I think that is my sort of number one message whenever I talk about my experiences in HR or, as a manager myself and as a leader myself or working with others is you have to take all this advice and then figure out what it looks like for you. So whether that is, okay, I am going to actually take my lunch break and go for a walk and listen to a training about delegation. And so I'm taking care of myself because that's important and I can't just work through my lunch break, but I do need to find some time for some development. So that's where I can do it. Or on Sunday mornings as I plan for my week, that's where I'm going to sit and also do a little planning for my work week as well, because that means I'm going into the week in a stronger place. For some people, that's not how they want to do it. And they'd much rather figure out, nope, within my 9 to 6, I'm going to carve out that time. And maybe that means I do 45-minute one-on-ones instead of an hour one-on-one and combine that time to do my own one-on-one with myself and sort of do that. So, or meet with my HR partner for some coaching sessions. So taking the time to figure out what do you need at this moment to become that leader that's going to be able to role model all of this and figuring out what that time looks like for you and working with your manager and partners to make that happen.
What Got You Here Won't Get You There is a good book.
Yes. Yeah.
As you were talking, it reminded me of that book. It's a great read. If you're listening, definitely check it out. But I was waiting for you to drop the D word, delegation.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were talking, I was saying to myself, okay, delegation. Yep. Delegation. All of these things are practices for delegation. And I think you kind of summarize them in this mini little framework to answer this question. And it's time management, organization, and delegation. Getting really solid with all three of those things could be really powerful in the continuing to be a high performer and leading by example, but also being a great people manager.
Yeah. And anytime I talk to managers about delegation, it really is a win-win. Because some managers are like, well, I know my team's really busy too, so I feel bad about doing that. But it could be a development opportunity for someone. And maybe it's not even on your team. Maybe it's a peer or someone else's team. But it goes back to collaborating with others to figure out what is the right thing to delegate. What's the win in doing it? Not just because it's off my plate, but maybe they're trying to learn the thing. Maybe it gives them exposure to different people. Maybe it puts sort of a spotlight on their work. Maybe they want to be a manager. So maybe I'm not going to do all the training of the new hires. I'm going to ask a more senior person on my team because that way I'm not sucked into all those trainings. So really looking at it, not just oh my God, get this off my plate. What poor schmuck's going to take it for me? It's no, this is really an opportunity for the right person to do it.
Another thing you brought up a few moments ago that stuck out to me is the necessity to find your own version that works for you, right? You could read a billion books out there, all kinds of processes and frameworks that say, here's the box that you need to fit into like this. And when you try to fit into those boxes and fit into every nook and cranny of those boxes, that's where burnout happens. That's when that happens because you cannot possibly accomplish that. You need to morph it and build it for your own needs. So I really appreciate that. That's a huge thing that I've learned in my career, that if you try to fit into someone else's box, it's not going to work real well. You got to make your own based on what has come before.
Absolutely.
I just added a fourth box to this framework that we're building here. We've got time management, organization, delegation, and now we've got prioritization, because I think that one's a solid one too.
Love that. Yep.
And we have a lot of great freelancers or contractors that help us too. So even if there's not someone on the team, is there a cost-effective contractor that you can hire? Can you outsource to some of these incredible new AI tools? Can you set up Zapier automations? Technology is ever growing and available to us. And so there's a lot of ways we can kind of think outside of those boxes that Shawn's talking about too.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of times when I work with solopreneurs that are maybe ready to hire somebody or a couple of people, we always work through, it doesn't mean full-time employee. It could be a vendor, a tool, a contractor, part-time, seasonal, whatever it looks like. And that's why I think doing the time audit is really helpful, because if you find yourself spending 2 hours building some report every single week. There's got to be a way to design that in whatever system you're using so that it spits it out for you. Or a lot of recruiters are using AI to help build job descriptions. It doesn't mean that they're just taking the AI and spitting it out into their website, but it means they're not starting from a blank piece of paper. And now maybe they only need to take 15 minutes to customize it and put a little flair on it. The bulk of it is already there. So I think thinking through all the resources that are available to you.
Amen. Shout out to our growth marketing team for building me incredible dashboards because otherwise I would spend hours and hours and hours pulling information. But I want to bring us kind of full circle here because we talked about people, we talked about self-reflection, and I think that the only thing we really haven't talked about is actually delivering that performance review. And I think the worst kind of feedback is the kind that feels left field once a year. And so my question to you is, how can leaders create a culture where feedback isn't just this annual requirement where somebody checks a box, but instead it's part of really a daily or weekly, I want to say ritual in the culture of the company?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up because I think even outside of just doing it more often, to your point, it needs to be part of your culture. So can you tie it to your values in a way? You know, if you've got a value of respect, well, I respect you enough to help you in your career. And so I'm going to give you feedback because I want you to grow and learn and celebrate when you do something right. So tying it into things that are already hopefully part of your culture. I think another thing is finding opportunities to do it on the spot, timely, all of those pieces without making it feel like it's a big deal, but also doing the prep, even if it's a 5-minute conversation so that it's still impactful. And I think ways to build that in from a process standpoint are if you have recurring one-on-ones and you have a recurring agenda, you know, whether that's in a system or just in a Google Doc, you know, adding in a moment of on-the-spot feedback, development touch base, you know, how did that presentation go? Something like that. So it's already built into some of those things that you're already doing. And then I think going back to what we were talking about a while ago, as a leader, being a role model of that, I suggest to managers, you know, at the end of every one-on-one, what feedback do you have for me? What can I be doing differently to support you? Or what else do you need from me in order to, you know, be successful here?
I love that.
So it shows like I want feedback as well. And I think on the flip side of that, showing vulnerability if something doesn't go well. I was coaching a manager about a month ago, and he didn't show his best self in a meeting. And he was aware of that. But he said, I don't know how to go back to the team because I don't want to make it a big thing. And maybe they didn't feel it the same way I felt it because on Zoom, you never know. And so I said, look, the best way to do it is say, hey, I've been thinking about that meeting. I don't know how you felt about it, but I kind of felt like I misstepped here, or that didn't feel right to me as I thought about it more. So I just wanted to let you know I had those thoughts. You know, what was your reaction in that moment? And just open the dialogue. And they could say, it was fine, no big deal. But I will remember that you had the vulnerability and humility to bring that to me. So if it is a big deal next time, we can have that conversation more safely. And so I think demonstrating it as a leader, building it into processes and times where it's already there in a very organic way, and then not shying away from those conversations, I think are some of the things that can really bring it to life into your culture a lot more than just that annual performance review.
If I was on the receiving end of that message from that leader, I would think and feel exactly what you said. I'd be like, that was really cool that they were willing to take that moment and acknowledge that. To me, it wasn't that big of a deal, but that's really cool that they did that. That imbues a lot more trust for me in that leader as someone that I want to be working with and alongside. So I really love that comment there.
And I think it's, you know, when I was talking about the values, I had a former CEO who, from him, it doesn't sound as cheesy as it sounds, but he would always talk about in his town halls how feedback is a gift. And so we're going to do Q&A, and I want to hear from you. These are some questions we got from an anonymous survey, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But you always heard it from him. And that was the place where we had, you know, a value around respect. And so he just had it be part of town halls that he did and conversations that he'd lead, when he'd send out emails about performance reviews, he said, I already did mine. I hope your name isn't on the list when HR sends me the list of people who haven't done it. So he really lived and breathed that, and people really respected him for it. And he did it in a way that was authentic to him.
So again, building this culture of feedback, right? One thing that I love that we do here at Trainual, we have a praise channel in Slack. This is where people can just say, hey, I want to shout out this person for what they've done. But the key to that, though, is every praise, we tie that to one of our 6 core values at Trainual. So we've got, carry the groceries, make ideas happen. We've got several different core values. And so whenever someone submits praise that gets shared with the whole team, we tie that to one or more of the core values. So it becomes this cultural thing of, yeah, hey, this person really carried the groceries. They really went the extra mile and did these things. And that is core. We all understand that language, right? So that developing that culture of feedback is so crucial. And I'm curious, in your experience, how does a strong feedback culture contribute to the employee growth and development within an organization?
Yeah, I think it really ties into understanding where I am in my journey, in my role, like going back to the good and great conversation. I understand where I am on my career path if I'm looking to get promoted. And frankly, it's not even about upward mobility. Maybe I want to move into marketing. And so it helps me understand, well, these are the skills that it takes in order to do that. And these are the competencies, and this is how I'm starting to demonstrate them. So it really gives me a full understanding of where I can grow in my career at this company, because that's what everybody wants. Like if you work at a company that you love, no, you may not stay there for your whole career and like retire with a gold watch like back in the day, but you want to stay there as long as you can, and really because you love the team, you love the product, you love the thing. And so, but I also want to know that I'm able to grow. And that may be defined differently for different people. I mean, I think that's the other piece around sort of that mentality of, is someone just good? They may be in a stage of their life where they have other things going on that they can just do 9 to 5. Like, I'm going to give you 9 to 5, but I don't have the above and beyond right now. But I need to be able to have that conversation with my manager, which is, again, part of all of these pieces. And so if I've got a culture where I feel comfortable having that conversation with my manager, then in a year or 6 months, when I'm ready to put my foot on the gas again, my manager's like, awesome, let's do it. This is how we're going to do it, all the things. And if I have to take my foot off the gas, I can have that conversation with my manager as well. So I think creating this feedback culture, tying it to your values, tying it to how we interact with people, what's expected of people, it just opens up such stronger conversations. And then I feel more engaged. I'm more likely to stay. I feel better about my manager. I will, bring other people in. Like I'll make referrals when we have new hires. And it just makes me feel so much more like a part of this community that I joined. And I think sometimes people think, oh, well, careers are this existential thing that people are thinking about. All the advice we've talked about today can be applied to if you're trying to be healthier and like go to the gym. If you've got family dynamics that you're trying to think about, like if your partner is more data driven and you're more, relationship based, like what does that mean for your relationship? Like, or your marriage or your partnership. So all of this is all life skills, and we're just applying it to the workplace in this moment.
I love that so much. One of the things that we have recently launched here at Trainual ties directly to this culture feedback is our mentorship program. So basically, this is just team members who have said, yes, I'd like to be a mentor, or I'd like to be a mentee, or I'd like to be both. And we've been paired up with people across the company who want to participate in this little program, and we're going to be mentoring each other. So Mallory is going to mentor me on personal branding, because she's like the personal branding queen. Check her out on LinkedIn. It's amazing. And so she's going to mentor me on that. I'm going to be mentoring one of our team members here on instructional design and developing good training. And so we're all helping each other. But I think the strength in that is we have the culture fit already, that we love to get feedback from each other. Like, bring it on. I know Mallory and I, when we first started working together, we had a discussion together about how we wanted each other to give each other feedback. Like, you give it to me straight. You give it to me straight. Yeah, I just want to hear it straight up, right? And that was a very important moment for us in our work relationship. And it's the same type of culture fit that we try to imbue here at Trainual. And I recommend this for anyone. Launch a mentorship program and watch people get feedback from each other and grow and develop. It's amazing what that can do. You've got so many skills on your team that you maybe didn't even know. So maybe you save a little bit of coin that way from other exterior professional development opportunities. You've got them living right there in your own organization.
Well, and I love that too, because first of all, you're helping potentially identify new managers, right? Like if someone really loves mentoring and they're getting good feedback that they're a good mentor, those are some of the skills that you need in order to be a manager. So instead of just looking at like your top salesperson, they may not be your best sales manager. So you're starting to identify some of those skills and competencies outside of their day-to-day jobs. And I think it also gives people the opportunity to kind of get a sense of, what it's like to be in those roles. And so maybe if your manager tells you something that you don't agree with or you don't love, you're like, okay, but I get it because like I've been mentoring this other person on something, and it's different roles, but it creates more of an understanding of like all the different pieces of working together. And to your point, really gives a great spotlight to people, because if you're mentoring someone now, if I'm Mallory's mentee and I hear someone talking about branding, I go, oh, you should talk to Mallory because she's great at that. And it's already kind of like escalating your brand within the organization.
Yeah, 100%.
Speaking of our mentorship, some people I think from the outside might think it's kind of funny that there's a generation or so between Shawn and I, and yet he's the mentee and I'm the mentor. And so I feel like generationally, we all have unique things that we can bring to the table. There's a universe where Shawn mentors me on training and development, or just how to be a great mentor, interestingly enough. And so I think in today's day and age, people use generational buckets more than ever. You hear like Gen Z this, millennial that. And of course, like boomers still get their fair share of it too. Any advice that you could give listeners for managing performance across these ever evident generational divides?
Yeah, I think it actually just goes back to what we were talking about through other pieces of this conversation, is that it's actually about the individual versus their generation. Just like I'm a different HR person than someone else who's in HR, I'm a different Gen Xer than someone else who's a Gen Xer. And so I think first just recognizing like, what does this individual care about? Are they super focused on career development? Are they looking more for compensation because something's going on in their life? Are they just trying to not get burnt out? So whatever might be going on. I remember at my last company and at my current company, I always said, for now, for me, career development is about doing things like this podcast, or getting out there and speaking, or doing the coaching and trainings that I do outside of my day-to-day. That's my career development. Not only is it because I love it and it gives me energy, but I learn something from it that I actually get to bring back to the company, like obviously where I'm the head of HR. So I think identifying what people are looking for in that moment, but there are other people that are my age that are still looking for that next internal title or that next thing, or maybe they want to change industries and work for a much bigger company. So it's all individualized. So I think that's the first thing, is just remember the human. And then I think the second part of that is what we were just talking about mentorship, is recognizing that people are bringing different experiences to the table, partially because of where they are in their lives. And so it was really funny. We were just talking the other day, I was talking with someone from the parent company of Obviously, and we were talking about how can we do more interesting communication about performance reviews and training, because we all know people are not reading our HR emails or our newsletters. And that's fine. I've been in this long enough. I know. And so he was asking, obviously as in influencer marketing, what are the trends in the influencer world, and how can we bring that to our internal comms? And so I sure as heck don't know. I'm not on TikTok and that kind of stuff, even though I'm in that space. And so I reached out to our strategy team, many of whom are much younger than me. And I said, what's happening? Like, what should I be knowing? Because I don't know any of it. And we're going to try a couple of those things. So I think those are things that's a great opportunity to say, like, hey, in theory, your generation kind of knows more about this. What am I missing?
I love that the mentor became the mentee in that regard, right?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Did you also hear Mallory putting me in a different generation than her? You're making me feel, oh, Mallory, come on.
Listen, I thought that was the nicest way to deliver that.
Well, I appreciate that. I'll go lay down for a nap when we're done here. So.
Hey, this generation likes to nap too.
Yeah.
Well, I honestly, in listening to you, I feel like there are managers from my past that really needed to hear this message, especially when I was 19 years old as a young mom and, just having managers that assume that you're just, this young kind of kid that's focused on being a new mom, and they just make all these assumptions about what you want for your life. And I feel like I had to really fight for opportunities because I have always been under the belief that you can be a great parent and a mom, and you can even be young and still absolutely just crush it in the business world. And that's always what I've wanted to do. It's why I love working for the woman I work for now, because she is just a super big advocate of being a working parent, but also crushing it in her executive role at Trainual. And so in listening to you, I just think if there are any managers listening now that maybe can take some time to self-reflect and say, am I making assumptions about my team based on who I think they are, whether it's a personality test or whether it's their generation or any number of the things that we've kind of talked about today in terms of buckets, just take a step back and say, let me ask versus kind of making any assumptions about what their goals are.
Absolutely. Well, and I think I'm a big proponent of, I call it embracing your and. And so you can be an awesome mom and really dedicated to your kids and really be a high performer and high achiever. And it might be that however you've designed it, but from again, 9 to 6 or whatever, I am laser focused on my job and I am doing all the things and I love it and I'm passionate and da 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 da. And then when I log off, I turn the button and I am laser focused on my kids and I love it and da 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 da. Both can be true. And I think that whether it comes to generations or roles within families or, I don't have kids, but I have a parent that is having a lot of health issues. And so that's where my attention is being pulled. So yeah, I don't have kids, but that doesn't mean I can work around the clock. A, I don't want to, but B, I can't because I have different responsibilities. So I think I just keep coming back to it's all about the individual, whether that's your individual company, individual team, or literally the individual.
So well said. So I think the only thing we probably haven't talked about, at Trainual, we call them pink elephants. But it's just a nice way of saying, the freedom to give constructive feedback or say things that maybe are uncomfortable and create like a safe space to do that. Because constructive feedback it's tough. I'd argue it's probably one of the hardest things that we'll do as leaders. I think it can be emotionally taxing on both ends, which is interesting because you really have to take the emotion out of it as much as possible. And it requires almost an art form to be effective. What is your best method for delivering feedback that provides everyone with the best possible outcome? And do you have any idea of how to maybe paint what that outcome should look like for people that are listening?
Yeah, I think it comes down to 3 different things. One, doing the preparation. And this doesn't mean reading off a script or anything like that, but I think making sure that you have all your ducks in a row as much as possible going into it. So, do you have the examples? Have you thought about why someone might push back or be unhappy with this? Is this the first time you've talked about it? Or is this like the 7th time you talked about it? So really taking the time to do that preparation, including thinking about what is this other person potentially going to say? And let me sort of play out some of those scenarios. So I think there's the prep piece. Then I think when you're going into the conversation, it is, first of all, just asking, is this a good time to have a feedback conversation? It doesn't mean you don't ever have it, but if they're legitimately not in the right headspace for whatever reason, like right now there's background noise happening in my house, so maybe I'm distracted, or the cat jumped up and wiggled my whole screen, and so that might, distract me. So, asking for permission basically to have the feedback conversation, and then in that conversation, have it be a conversation. ask questions. How do you think it went? What's your reaction to that? Just asking a lot of follow-up questions so that it truly is a conversation versus, this is the thing you did wrong. I'm telling you, you did it wrong. Don't do it again because I said so. And that's extreme, but that's how it can come across sometimes. So you have to think through it. And then wrapping up with actionable next steps. So thank you so much for having this conversation. I know sometimes it's hard to hear this feedback. I'm very supportive of you. I know you can do this. I think if you just laser focus on this thing, or this was a one-off thing, and I think we figured out what caused, sort of the disruption, I have total confidence you're going to nail it next time. And let's do the prep work we talked about or whatever. So you feel my support. You feel my understanding of what's going to happen next. And we both have a handshake agreement on this is how we're going to solve this moving forward. And by the way, that's true for positive feedback too. Because if you don't do all of that for positive feedback, it can fall kind of flat and you don't get all the energy out of the positive feedback. So I think if you kind of follow that framework, it will help. But I agree. I mean, I've been doing this for a very long time. I coach people on this. I train people on it. But when I have to have a difficult conversation, I'm very nervous. I'm anxious. I think about it all the time. So it is one of the hardest things to do. And that just means you're a good person and a good manager because you don't want to deliver the tough news. I think the final sort of like icing on the cake I'd give if this was a 3-layer cake that I just laid out is recognizing if the conversation is going off the rails, pause it. I think sometimes people feel like they have to power through if someone is really combative, if they're really upset, if they've started to kind of shut down, pause, because you are not going to get what you need out of that conversation. They're not going to get what they need. So it's better to say, hey, it feels like to me that this is a harder conversation than I anticipated, or, it seems like this is really upsetting to you. Again, using I statements, because I don't know what you're going through. Would it be helpful if we paused for a couple of minutes? Or do you want to come back in an hour or tomorrow morning? If they say no, it's like, no, I'm just upset, but go, I'm here. Keep trying. But it's okay to pause because otherwise it's not going to get to where you want to be and it's not helpful for anybody.
Interestingly enough, because we're talking about high performers, we tend to be like, go, 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 always on, move to the next thing. Like that's just how we're wired. And so when you're essentially raising a team of other high performers, they can be that same way too. And I think sitting in silence is probably the hardest thing, I think, for me to do. And it's so important. And every time I have this conversation around like how to give tough feedback, it's like, deliver it very minimally, like stick clear to the facts, be very, brief in your feedback and give them time to just sit with it for a few minutes in silence and absorb it before they respond. And I think that's really tough, but I'm so glad you highlighted it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about any time you're getting news, right? Like you're trying to process it in the moment. And that's, again, going back to knowing people on your team. I have managed, I'll say more introverted people just to give it a label, but people who need time to process. And so very often I'll go through something with them and I specifically would say, why don't we take a few hours, kind of digest this, read over the document that I sent or read over the report that I was just talking about again with a fresh perspective. And let's regroup in the morning and talk more about this. Because I know even if they're not upset, they're just literally processing. And I know that they need that space. Other people I've managed, or honestly, someone like myself, when people have given me feedback, I need to talk it through live. Because if you let me go, I'm going to like obsess about it and not be able to move on. So I actually need to kind of like talk it out a little bit more and then I'm okay and I'll move on just fine.
Wow. I feel like we've gotten this hour has been just packed with so much good information. It's been so wonderful. I want to chat, just sum up here. We've talked about all these different improvements that we can make as leaders. Leading by example is absolutely important. And there are some people who will absolutely take note of what the leaders around them are doing and showing and follow suit. But for some, these are skills that need to be learned, that need to be acquired over time and practice. And so my final question is really just how do you integrate professional learning and development in the foundation of performance reviews and forward-looking growth and everything else we've discussed here today?
Yeah, I think it's really important that managers and leaders and even HR professionals like myself remember that we are also employees. And so everything that we're telling our employees to do about learning and growth, we need to be doing for ourselves for two reasons. One, we should be learning and growing. And so going to those trainings, going to those conferences, hiring a coach, whatever the thing is that we need, working with our HR partners in our own development will just make us better leaders, HR people, etc. And it shows that we're walking the walk with our teams. And so whether that's because of upward feedback, just our own development goals, 360s that we do, letting your team know, one thing that I'm really working on over this quarter is X. And, I'm going to be working with a coach. You might see me attending this conference. And I'm really excited because I think it will make me a better leader or, whatever. And it's important to me that we do these things for ourselves. So if there's something you want to work on, and as we talk about feedback for you, let's talk about that piece of it as well, because it's not just about giving the feedback, it's the growing and learning that comes from that. And so, it's good to do for yourself, end of sentence. And it's a good way to role model it for your teams as well.
Money. Well, thanks so much for such a valuable conversation today. It's truly one of my favorites. Click the link in our show notes for a made-for-you process template that highlights everything Karen covered today as far as best practices around how to manage people's performance. As always, document your processes and be a good human. We'll catch you next time.